Welcome to Books for Life, a podcast about books that can impact your life.
Hello and welcome to Books for Life podcast. Today we're reviewing a book called The Art of Seduction by Robert Greene. It's a very long book. You might have heard of Robert Greene from a book that he wrote called The 48 Laws of Power. It's a similar kind of book as The 48 Laws of Power. It delves into something a bit controversial. Robert Greene's not justifying what he's covering, but it's got a kind of manual sort of feel to it in which he's telling you how to. Welcome, Nico.
Thanks. Yeah, all good. How have you been?
Yeah, all good. Just giving a sort of overview of the book. The Art of Seduction intro really covers that seduction is something that the West has come to grips with over the last couple of 100 years, because back in the old days, people didn't need to seduce each other. Marriages were usually arranged. It was all sort of like
rape and pillaging.
Yeah. And that with the end of the feudal era and the introduction of kind of like romantic love and everything, some men realized that you got a lot further with women if you had these seductive tactics and so on. But the interesting thing about the book and about that introduction that Robert Greene makes is also we shifted from autocratic monarchies or empires to democracies. And so the other aspect of the Art of Seduction is seduction on a nation level with respect to charismatic politicians. And so he's saying seduction is a bigger part of our world now because we live in a open market with a democracy in which we do need to be seduced by politicians or parties or people selling us products. So very rough and quick intro of the book, Art of Seduction. Yeah.
Yeah, so I completely agree. Don't look at this book and think men and women. Just keep your thoughts open to the various aspects of seduction in today's society.
Yeah, and the book predates all of the game, all of that kind of stuff. I think he wrote it in 2001, so long before kind of like Neil Strauss and the game and everything. So he didn't write this book with any of that more modern like game theory available. It's a very historically minded book. It's like full of historical examples and so on. So I wouldn't put it in the same basket as like game. If you know.
No, but at the same time, there's still a lot of you can take out of this and apply to today's society and game in itself. Yeah. And I think that's something that we picked up more on, especially the more we discussed the book. Post reading it, was that a lot of what we read we can instill in today's society and instill into our lives. And where should we start?
Well, we could give a really high level summary of the book. So it has two parts. Part one covers what I'd call seductive archetypes, like ideal lover characters, and there's 9 of them. He then covers different victims and different categories of those. Then he covers anti-seducers or anti-seductive behaviours. And then the second part of the book, which is huge, is all about the seductive process. So that's a real high level of it. And Robert Greene, I think, is a historian by background. So the book is full of historical examples and quotes from novels or literature or specific characters, some of whom pop up a few times, not always with the man in the role of seducer, quite often with women. Yeah. So it's like kind of balanced in that sense.
And politicians and kings and queens and a variety of characters, which makes it a really interesting read. You've got an abundance of examples behind each of these, seducers or victims. So it makes it more of a story than a fact-giving book.
Yeah. But reading through it, given when it was written, one thing that was constantly in my mind was how much of this is still applicable, how much of this is out of date. And I think some of the stuff in the book is out of date. We can come to that later. Some of it's timeless. Some of the stuff in it is stuff that will never change because of human nature. Mm-hmm. But yeah. So what are your thoughts on reading it?
My thoughts on reading it. so much to cover. I think we really got to break it down. Should we start off with the types of seducers there are, in terms of maybe not going through all of them, but kind of just understanding how it fits into today's society?
Yeah, so for the listeners, I mean, this is a huge book, and so it's hard to know how to summarize it for you so it's not a 3-hour podcast.
24 hours on Audible. It took us a while to get through.
Yeah. So the ideal lovers is like, imagine you take archetypal characters from literature. Like an archetype is like the abstract version of a character, like a hero or a villain, or a savior. Those are archetypes.
And categorizing them.
And so there's the rake, the siren, the ideal lover, the dandy, the natural, the coquette, the charmer, the charismatic, and the star. And I mean, practically, I think the idea of this section is, if you meet someone who's one of these categories, you'll identify them. Someone who plays hot and cold, that's a coquette. Someone who plays with their sexuality, so they're maybe a masculine guy, but they've got a feminine touch, or a woman who's kind of a bit more masculine, that's a dandy, someone who like plays with that line. You can think of like rock stars and pop stars who are like that. Like maybe Johnny Depp is one where he's like wearing makeup and colourful clothes. Like you'd say he's a dandy.
But I think more than identifying other people is really to identify yourself. But more than just identify yourself is to learn about the other types and identify how, as an individual, we are not set in one of these types. We can very much so move between them, or even say most people start off with a natural. A natural is like the ideal, our childish selves, how we once were, honest, spontaneous, playful, which
cheeky,
which most people find attractive, and we kind of stay in that area until our late teens, really, until we really get into life. So what you can kind of see is that's how you are as a person, and it's from there learning these other types of seductive behaviours and really seeing what fits you. And I think you can be up to your 40s, 50s and seeing, what, that doesn't kind of fit me as much. Maybe not even personally trying to move to another type, but just kind of understanding really where you fit in as a seducer, because we all have our own types. Whoever you are, you will be one of these. And I think that's what's great, is that there's nothing he leaves out.
And you can enhance your strengths. Like if you're a charmer, you realize that, then you can play that as one of your strengths. Or if you're a charismatic person or what have you. So yeah, it's not just about identifying other people. It's also about identifying yourself, which maybe one that you want. If you feel like you're not a charismatic person, I think it's something you could develop. I think you can
definitely. No one's set in stone with anything in life. And I find it, super applicable here in terms of you being able to change who you are.
Yeah, so those were the ideal lovers. Then he goes into the victims. It's a bit of a crazy word to use. But it's the word he uses, so we'll use it. And he covers, I think, 14 or 15 different kinds of victims.
Or 18.
18
yeah.
kinds of victims. We won't go through all of them, of course. But again, it could be the kind of thing where maybe you see yourself in one of those types, or maybe you identify someone you're interested in where they fall into. And I think the how-to part of the book is match the ideal lover with the victim.
Well, it's harder said than done. That's the main issue I found with the book. It's great knowing all the types of victims and the types of seducers, but you're trying to identify one of these 18 types in your victim. But without getting to know the person, it is super hard. So you're going to have to try and... I don't know, I find it, especially myself, when I I'm mainly putting this into to the dating side, because obviously I haven't really come across too much in business or politics. But I find it really hard to identify the victim. I find that I spend a lot of time kind of pushing and pulling between them and trying to find out what works. So it's not something that you can go straight into a relationship with, but it's something that over time and getting to know another person, you can then focus into more specifically what type of seducer or victim a person is.
Yeah, and I think this is a bit where the book is maybe a little bit, the book could be a little bit like out of date, in the sense that these days simply getting someone's attention is half the battle, you know?
More than half.
Yeah,
more than half.
People are so distracted, and they're so distracted, and they have access to just millions of people potentially, especially if you live in a really big city. That just getting someone to pay you attention for 5 minutes is like more than half the battle. Let alone analyzing their character and saying, oh, okay, this person is a new prude. You know, then I need to be this in order to seduce them. It's like,
yeah. But that's how it is. I feel, personally, it's hard to get their attention, but once I have their attention, they're in my pocket. Like, I am the puppet master. But to get them on the ends of the piece of string is easily 75-80% of the battle. As you said, just the abundance of people and the abundance of connecting between people, it just makes connecting with new people so much harder.
Yeah, I think it's definitely handy to think of these labels, because if you do talk to someone for 5 minutes, you probably can like place them somewhere, within 5 minutes, roughly speaking, right?
You can, but that's not going to be your aim, is it?
If you meet an 18-year-old girl, she's not going to be the lonely leader kind of victim. She's going to be the novice, right? Probably.
Yes, okay.
Or if you meet a 35-year-old man or woman who's been around a lot, that's the roue, right? The person who's just a bit jaded and needs some like childish energy and some spark back in their life, I suppose. Roughly speaking.
Okay.
Anyway, so I suppose that's probably an applicable part of it is it gives, when we have labels for things, it helps us make decisions and like efficiently make decisions, I think that's where it's helpful.
Yeah, I think as well it's more of I'm going to push this is more of a masculine kind of ideology, just because men are very much more structural, logical, straightforward,
But we're also expected to make the moves.
True, but one thing is, in this aspect, we want to go from A to B to C to D. We don't like just to be floating around in the middle.
A to B,
so
A
this
to B,
is
A to B,
yeah,
A to B.
exactly. So this is kind of a lot more, just makes it a little bit easier in our sort of mind to understand what's going on where we are. And that was I just found it such an interesting book, because it would never have crossed my mind to categorize women.
And that's probably a big criticism people would make of the book is, it's so heartless and cold and scientific to try to like a taxonomy, like animal. There's these different animal species, and they're like, but that's because people think about seduction and romance so emotionally rather than looking at it like rationally.
Yeah.
So that's, I suppose, what he's bringing to the table.
Heart or the brain.
Yeah, it's what he's bringing to the table, and the thing he's bringing to the table is that to a degree, seduction is a science, right? Mm-hmm. It's a bit of an art and it's a bit of a science.
Yeah, definitely. I just want to take a part out of this podcast just quickly, just to hit back on one of the types of seducers, which is the coquette, which is really what a lot of men kind of who are looking into seduction kind of drift upon, which is the push and pull with women, the becoming the object of desire rather than making the woman the object of desire, and just letting people just pause for a second and learn that there are a variety of other types of seducers available that they really should take a minute and look into.
So then he kind of wraps it up with anti-seductive behaviours, which is very funny, I think.
Yeah, and I think it's the area where you can get the most out of in terms of just straight up what you shouldn't be doing.
What you shouldn't be saying, what you shouldn't be doing, yeah. And it's a bit funny, isn't it, when you read it and you're like, oh God, I've done that before.
Yeah, and I think this is an area which is much more less of the male to female aspect. This is more of just between people in general. You've got, a variety of obvious ones, such as being a tightwad, which is always, obviously you don't want to be spending huge amounts of money, but you don't want to be spending too little amount of money when with other people.
The anti-seductive behaviours are actually really funny. We're just looking at Nico's notes. You've got windbags who just talk all the time about themselves. Reactors are whiny. They kill the mood by complaining all the time. Suffocators drown you in affection before they even know you.
It's great. It's great. And I think also good for you to spot these characters.
And I think it's where you should start, really. Once you've read the book, that's where you should start, is the anti-seductive behaviours, spot which ones you do as a person,
and stop them.
And just strike them out. Because for me, reactors, it's just the most frustrating thing. If there's someone's going to whine, you're done. I'm just not going to pay attention to you. You're going to be put aside in a box, and I will talk to one of the other 7 billion people on this earth.
Yeah.
So just look at these and just work on them. Work on them. Male, female, politician, businessman. Work on them.
Yeah. And you can see that these could apply to if you're working in sales and you're in a meeting with someone.
What are the things that people don't want? Well, they don't want someone who's complaining. You imagine trying to do a sale to a company and the first thing you see, you complain about the plane, or you complain about the train that you arrived on or something. It comes across so badly. Or you just talk all about your business and the customer doesn't get a chance to talk about theirs.
Well, first thing you should do in a sales pitch is you don't pitch your product. You ask them, what are their difficulties? What are they finding at the moment? How are you running your company?
Sales 101.
Yeah. And it's, we can see easily from that these can be fit into so many areas of life.
Yeah, so true. Interesting. That's cool. It's a book about seduction, but you could apply it to business and sales, that part anyway. So the next part, which is gigantic, is the seductive process, which I thought is an area where the book
takes a nosedive
and doesn't really have anything to do with today's reality. 20 years later, it just seems so completely.
Well, it's crazy though. It's only been 20 years.
Yeah.
It could have definitely been reduced. I think, I can't remember the 24 steps.
24 steps to seduction,
Yeah, so after every date I go back and see which step I've moved to and go forward from there. I think it's a lot of this, of the 24th stage, you've kind of got to pick and choose. You can't apply all of it. No one's perfect.
I think there's chunks in there that are worth thinking about. You could read the 24 steps and you could say, right, next time I have a date with someone, here's some things I can think about that I can directly apply to how the date goes, where we go, or what we do, or that kind of thing. But people have so many dating options now that, I think half of it is just getting the person to pay you attention for 5 minutes. Let alone worrying about the second date.
Yeah, I think from the second part of the book, I think apart from each individual, step, I think the stories behind them are really, what keep you going, what keep you interested, what gives you more to think about.
I think the other aspect in which it's a bit out of date is that people these days have sex pretty quickly. Right?
Yeah.
And it feels like that whole section is written about a time and a place where sex was
Sex on the third date was pretty quick, like super quick. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's a weakness of that section is that in a way the sexual revolution has meant that if you are attractive on the first or second date, you'll probably have sex, and in some ways at that point the man has a bit more power, right? I'm not saying that it's game over for the girl, but you're probably doing something right if you have sex with a girl a couple of times, and these days it's like not that hard to get that after a couple of dates.
No, not at all. And where does that leave you? Do you know what I mean? Have you just already gone through all 24 steps?
Well, I think the thing that's also part of this discussion is I think a lot of guys don't. I don't think a lot of guys want to seduce. I think they just want to get laid.
But then you've got to think as well, this also applies to being in long-term relationships. You know, you still got to be seducing your wife or your girlfriend for 7 years, because it's just how it is. A woman will always go for a more desirable man, whether you're married for 20 years or you've been dating for 6 months.
I suppose that's the kind of voodoo hidden power of seduction is the extent to, if you have a long-term relationship, the extent to which you use it. You don't want to overuse it, so it's like psychologically.
No, you want to sprinkle it in like
it's like a bit
salt
of
and pepper.
Cayenne pepper.
Yeah.
So worth reading. Interesting chunks in that second half, but a gigantic read. Like 24 hours on Audible is mental.
It was mental, and we'll be honest with you. We did a recording of this first, and we recorded for 2 hours, and then we
were summarising the book. So kind of some takeaways, I guess, was I think it certainly encourage you to be creative in your seduction. So you could start to think about, am I being boring and I'm only talking about my job? You know, this book will probably make you think, here's the box and here's me thinking outside the box. I can talk about many different sorts of things. I can design a date, I can structure a date with someone that's very different. It's not just the boring dinner movie date, you know? So
never go for dinner on a date. Never go to the movies on a date.
Yeah. So so that's a big aspect of the book, is I think it'll make you realise that you've got way more options than you realise. The board game is really big, you know. There's a lot of ways you could be and a lot of ways you could play it. So there's definitely that. Probably encourage a bit of self-awareness. Probably encourage you to think about the person that you've taken on the date as well.
Yeah, it makes you look back and evaluate. Which, you know, sometimes it's necessary. It's necessary to look back and evaluate your previous actions, and if you can pinpoint at least where you went wrong, then that's what's going to stop you making the same mistake in the future.
If I was to compare this to game advice, like, you know, various websites and books and whatever, I think where this is probably really quite different is that this is Robert Greene drilling into the psychological level, whereas, you know, game advice for men is quite often like really shallow level. It's like, oh, peacock by wearing an outrageous piece of clothing, you know, nigger, or mystery method like tarot cards and like this kind of shallow level stuff. What's probably really helpful and what this book brings to the table is it's drilling into the psychological level, which is really more timeless and deeper than just like...
Yeah, more natural to who you are as a person.
Yeah.
More naturally, I go towards this type of seducer. Yeah.
Which explains why sometimes guys who are not very good looking and don't dress very well can still pull birds, right? Because they're doing something right at a psychological level.
Yeah.
Which is probably a good breakthrough, and I don't know if it's a revelation for some of our listeners, is big muscles, being well dressed, having money, they may help you, but it's not those are not the only things, and sometimes they're not what you have to have to be seductive, right?
Agreed.
It's the psychological level, the journey that you and that person go on. That's what really is what it's about.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed.
Cool.
Guys, we definitely say to read the book. We are going to warn you that it's a very long one.
Mm-hmm.
We definitely say at least the first part of the book is definitely worth the read.
Have an open mind.
Yeah.
Have an open mind and take some notes. Maybe think about your dating experiences. Think about maybe dates that have gone well or badly.
Think about what anti-seductive behaviours you've shown off and which ones you need to pull back.
I think it's almost in a way a bit of a warning as well. Like there's some stories in there of people really messing up their lives because of being seduced by someone. And so in a way, the book is also like,
watch out,
and like be aware of maybe where your weaknesses are. That someone could seduce you and exploit you. So there's that as well. Yeah.
Excellent. Shall we get to the rating, or do you have any further points to add?
No further points to add.
Okay.
So our rating system is it actionable? Is it persuasive? And what was the information like? And ease of read. So actionable, yeah, I'd say first part of the book, pretty actionable.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Second part, pinch of salt.
Yeah, agreed. Yeah. Just because I think that it doesn't take 24 stages to seduce someone in 2021.
No, have a read of the second part and just make your own mind about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I think.
Persuasive. Yeah, again, I'd say the first part of the book was persuasive. He's got a lot of good examples. And I think the psychological rationale makes sense.
Yeah, it's not the be all and end all of dating. It's not like you have to stick with finding out what type of seducer, what victim you're dealing with, but it's something you can definitely consider and something that might be more applicable to some people than others.
Yeah. Information in the book. Yeah, it's okay.
Yeah, it's okay.
It's got stuff that you could take away from it, I suppose. Like, it's dealing with some pretty fundamental aspects of human psychology, right? So, you could take it away and say, oh, here's this politician, I realise what psychological level they're working at, or here's a salesperson trying to you can definitely, it'll make you'll be more awake about how you can be manipulated, I think.
Yeah.
That'd be fair.
Yeah, and as you said before, I think that's one of the areas that you read it and you don't think about at first, but really that is also something you got to think, oh, what type of victim am I?
Mm-hmm.
What kind of seducer's coming on to me, as well as you being the seducer.
Yeah. Ease of read?
Yeah.
I'd say...
I think it was. I think it was very easy, especially the first part with all the stories. Even the second part has loads of stories, and the stories really make it. They're very personable.
I'd say that at the paragraph level, it's readable. He's a good writer. The stories are engaging, but at the macro level, at the architectural level, it's a tough read. But individual paragraphs and sections are readable. They're engaging stories. You remember them even weeks after reading the book.
I think we see this style a lot in a lot of Robert Greene's work. It's long, a little
48
bit tougher
Laws of
parts.
Power is the same. Some of the characters are the same as well. Some historical figures. Kind of final summary thoughts. I think maybe a kind of weakness of the book is this is not really a manual that's going to get you up and running. If he really wanted to have that final step, it would be go out every day and approach 10 or 15 members of the sex that you're attracted in, and just walk up to them. If he really wanted to fill that final step of bridging the gap between the book and actually your life, it would be go out and day game, I would say.
Yeah, I'd say this is very tertiary information, stuff that you can just bring in at the end. You know, it's not the base for all seduction.
You will not become a seducer after reading this book.
No.
You have to actually like apply it in.
Go out in public. See someone you like. Get out your notebook. Go. Let me look at them. Which type of victim are they? Yes. Okay. No, it's very much information that you've got to sprinkle in at a later stage of learning about seduction.
Yeah.
Rating out of 5?
I'd say 3 out of 5.
3. Okay. I'm going to give it, now that we're doing half stars, I'm going to give it a 3.5.
Okay.
3.5. Yeah, 3.5. Just because the second part was just a bit of a bore, but it was a good book.
It wasn't a waste of time. It wasn't a total waste of time.
No, it kind of got. Yeah, it kind of like got really exciting at the beginning, and you're loving it, and then the love starts to die away.
Yeah, it does. It's such a slog towards the end. It is such a slog, which is a bit of a shame. I think you could have compressed that second part.
Yeah.
Into a bit punchier.
But still, buy the book. Listen to the first part.
Yep.
And you won't regret it.
Yep. Great. All right.
Excellent. Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Have a good week.